Do you think it's okay to use Gorilla Glue when you're making a wooden model? You didn't use contact cement to put that together, did you? Do you think it's acceptable to use tape to put a wooden model together? No, seriously, do you think it's okay to use hot glue when you're building a balsa model? Then this video is not for you. My name is Eric Strebel. I'm an industrial designer. Welcome to my channel about product design and making. These days, concepting, prototyping, or model making as a designer or an architect, your best bet is probably basswood or balsa wood. You can get this stuff at most good hobby stores or craft stores. It comes in variety thicknesses and widths and is pretty inexpensive. You can also use dowels that you can get at most big box retailer stores as well. Basswood on the left has a very tight grain. Balsa on the right is very light, but has a much coarser grain, is harder to paint over and to finish. Poplar is also a good choice, but much harder to source. I'm gonna state the obvious, wood has a grain. You're gonna try to use that to your advantage whenever possible. When you're bending against the grain, you're gonna get some good strength. When you're bending with the grain, you're gonna get it to bend real easy, and it's gonna be nice and pliable for you. Good tool is gonna be an X-acto blade and lots of sharp blades, and a metal 90-degree square, as well as a metal ruler. Some good adhesives like super glue and some kicker, and tape is gonna be useful as well. A saw and a miter box for cutting against the grain and cutting dowels is super useful, although a Japanese pull saw is even better. Have access to a laser cutter. To build this 2-inch or 50.8 millimeter cube, you'll need to do some basic math. We know that the thickness of the material is 3.2 millimeters, and that's going to allow us to calculate how tall and how wide the pieces are going to be. So our side pieces are going to be 44.4 by 47.6 millimeters, and the two end caps are going to be standard square 50.8 by 50.8 millimeters. Let's build a 2-inch cube out of some 1/8-inch balsa. For that, all we're going to need is a sharp X-acto blade and a right angle square like I have here. Cutting against the grain is not too bad, and you can see there's some chip out on the bottom of this piece of balsa. If you're getting that, your blade's too dull. Change it, get something sharp, and you'll be able to cut through the balsa no problem. Cutting against the grain on a piece of balsa, not a big deal. You'll see I press down a little bit harder at the very end of the stroke when I'm cutting through, and this allows me to get a nice straight clean cut at the end of my cut so I don't get any tear out even with a sharp X-acto blade. Now that we have the 4 body parts, we can turn our attention to the 2 end caps. 50.8 millimeters by 50.8 millimeters. They don't take up the entire width of the board, so I don't need to cut all the way through. Cutting with the grain, very easy. Shouldn't take you more than a couple of passes for an 1/8-inch piece of balsa. I'm going to use super glue or cyanoacrylate to glue my pieces of balsa together. I use a square to keep everything nice and straight and square, of course. The balsa soaks up the super glue quite quickly and easily. You probably don't even need any kicker. Having good accurate parts, cut straight and square, is pretty helpful here. I have a flat board with 220 grit sandpaper, and I take my cube and I sand it in a figure 8 pattern to get it nice and flat. With my cube nice and flat, I can just lay down some cyanoacrylate and glue the end caps on to finish my cube. Once the super glue is dried, sand lightly on each side to make all the surfaces flat, and you have a nice balsa model. Basswood is considerably denser than balsa wood. Cutting it with an X-acto blade doesn't really work all that great. A much better option is to use a saw, and in this case I suggest some sort of a miter box and some sort of a saw to cut in the miter box with. They also make smaller hobby versions for this, and they work great for smaller parts. I'm going to rip cut on the bandsaw the longer pieces that are too big to fit into the miter box. Sand the part flat after you've cut it on the bandsaw. I'm going to cross cut my 4 other pieces in the miter box with the back saw. Next, I'm going to clamp all the pieces together so that I can get them all flat and smooth and the same size. Sanding them by hand works okay, but if you want to speed things up, use a belt sander. Let's tape the parts together so that we can accurately put the pieces together ahead of time and use the tape as a guide to help us lock the pieces into place. That way we can just apply our super glue in the spot that we want, fold the part together, and let the tape hold things in place while the super glue sets up. I'm using some painter's tape. This tape isn't too aggressive, so removing it from the wood afterwards isn't too difficult. We got the last side to attach, and this requires glue on both pieces. If you have a little gap, you can try to jam in a little bit of sawdust and then come back and add a little bit of super glue to fill in that gap if your parts aren't perfect. Sand in a figure 8. That way your part will be nice and flat on all the sides. Rotate your cube and let's build the end caps. You'll notice on the miter box that I clamp it to the table. My miter box also has a couple of holes in it so that you can screw it to the table and secure it even in a better way than just using a clamp. I cross-cut all the parts to make my square 50.8 by 50.8 end caps, and we'll super glue those in place next as well. Be accurate when you place your end caps, as the super glue soaks into the wood and dries almost instantaneously. Sand in a figure 8 on your flat sanding surface and you're done. Now, if you want to color or stain your cube, simple trick here is to use a marker. You can buy stain in the store, but you'll be kind of limited. The marker is going to give you a full range of colors in pretty much any color that you want to give your object or your model some color and some pop. Now my miter box comes with a 45-degree angle. This is handy for cutting 45-degree cross cuts. But even better is if you have a chop saw. Cutting these 45-degree cross cuts on a chop saw will give you a significantly higher accuracy rate than if you cut it by hand on the miter box. I have a stop block set up on my chop saw, and this allows me to cut all my 50.8 millimeter parts square with a 45-degree bevel on every single side in a very easy, quick fashion. Now it's just a matter of gluing each face to another face to put your box together. Notice that I put the super glue far away from the edge. This prevents the super glue from seeping out. I also place both edges of each face on the table to align those two edges so that you get good alignment on your box. Notice that I leave the last corner unglued. I know that the box is going to need a little tweaking. It's wood after all. So I dribble in my super glue and then I tweak my box so that I can line the two remaining corners up with each other, and I hold them in place to get a nice good fit. Again, adding the super glue a little farther down on the surfaces so I don't have super glue oozing out of the edges of my box, and I get a nice clean box this way. That's the last surface of our basswood model. You can sand it flat on your sanding pad. It really won't take very much. Don't forget to do it in a figure 8 pattern. And here I'm gonna use a green marker to basically dye my wood. You're gonna get a nice model that pops in whatever color that you want. In the next episode of Wooden Model Making Advanced Basics, we're going to take a look at steam bending and laminating wood, as well as a bunch of other tips and tricks so that you can up your wooden model making game. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Make sure to hit the bell so you get notifications every time I have a new video. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Links in the description below and on the channel page. Rock on. Don't forget to check out the t-shirts and hoodies in the merch shelf below. Click here to check out some of the other design and making videos that I have that you might enjoy.